Welcome in, Believe in Commanders podcast, brought to you by FanDuel. We are part of the Believe Network. Scott Jackson, and their number is 13. Anthony Armstrong over there on the far right. In the middle, Logan Paulsen from Commanders Radio, good enough to give us some time today. And, of course, he and Anthony go way back from their Redskin days. Good to have you in here, Logan. How you been?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me on, guys. I'm looking forward to talking with both of you today.
Yes, indeed. Logan's been kicking tail, taking names all on the field. He's a fashion icon. Didn't know if you knew this. You're very popular in the YouTube comments. Your last attire on the sideline at practice, they were like loving the 1984 beach dad look. My man had the floppy hat on, the big shades. Too much swag out there for him, man. Just too much swag. These young players don't know how to really dress it up. So I love to see it, man. Glad to have you here. Glad to see you having a successful transition after the game. Let's go right to your position. The one you played, the jersey on the wall, number 82, the tight end room. We got Chigakonkwo in the building. And you still have holdovers with John Bates, Colston, Yankoff, and then Ben Sinnott as well. What are you seeing from this tight end room? What are your expectations of this tight end room in this new David Blough offense?
Well, I think the expectation for the tight end room is really kind of colored by what the rest of the league is doing. And what I mean by that is when you look at kind of the premier offenses, like they're starting to push more towards these heavier personnel groupings. They're getting in 12 personnel more, 13 personnel more, kind of getting away from the 11 because defenses have gotten so good at defending that. So I look at this room and I kind of say to myself, have you constructed anything or is the personnel good enough to abide by some of those principles that you're seeing around the league? And so when I look at John Bates, maybe the best blocking Y in the league, like he's got that on lock, right? And then you look at Chig coming from Tennessee and you kind of say to yourself, man, like he has a very unique ability to stretch the field vertically. So like when you look at his stuff from Tennessee, man, like there's a clip of him running, like got like a 3-level throw to the offensive left where it's like a flat, a corner, and then they run the pylon route, that kind of really high corner route. And usually that's reserved for a receiver, but he's running that route. And so when you've got a guy, right, who can do that kind of stuff, you're like, man, we can get into 13. Maybe Ben Sinnott can be in there in kind of blocking situations, and Chig can be kind of that move piece. And we can run conventional wide receiver route tree stuff. So again, it's the room is exciting. Good athletes. Yankoff's, I thought, had a really nice OTA. Cager was out there the other day. He's this tall, angular, long, converted wide receiver, can move around, right? And so, like, they've got some pieces here. It just depends on how David Blough can kind of take all this talent, take all these skill sets, and execute it in 2026.
Well, of course, a lot of eyes on the guy throwing them the football. Jayden Daniels, healthy, thankfully, after last year's season of injury, and this brand new offense. But an offense that seems to cater his skill set. What have you seen there so far in the limited time you guys are out there, and what excites you about the opportunities for Jayden and David Blough's offense?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the same stuff, or a lot of the stuff that you would expect to see kind of coming from Detroit. You know, a little bit more under center, a little bit more condensed formations, a little bit more motion, a little bit more shifts. And again, like one of the things about Cliff's offense that, I liked was it was simplistic. You could play fast. You could kind of get easy looks from the defense, but it also was easy for the defense at times. And I do think just even over the first couple OTA practices, there's just a level of complexity that, again, Anthony's probably familiar with or remembers from when we were with Kyle. Like you're just getting in these different condensed formations. You're getting the press off. You're getting in these bunches. You're forcing switch releases, and you're creating easier opportunities for some of these wide receivers. And so, like everyone talks about, lack of the wide receiver depth or whatever. But I do think like this offense is going to elevate that group. And so when you look at Jayden and his skill set and what he does well, I think it really lends itself to this style of offense. Kind of, we're going to work the play action game. We're going to work boots. We're going to work waggles, but also the quick game and the intermediate game is still alive for him. And I think that was one of the things we saw in 2024 that was so effective for him.
Yeah, definitely thinking with DQ saying, hey, you got to find something new. You're new on both sides, offensively and defensively. How much is that being a benefit for them right now? Just to know that everything is fresh, even with veterans coming in, free agents like Van Jefferson, they're learning the offense along with the new guys and with the holdovers as well. So how is this new uncertainty, if you will, kind of looking to benefit this team? How they using it to their advantage?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question because like I think back to 2012, obviously like Robert Griffin had just come in, like we were running all this 50 series kind of behind closed doors, quarterback run stuff, and we didn't really show any of that in OTAs. And then all of a sudden week 1 versus New Orleans, like that's the offense, right? Robert's running all over the place. We got play actions off of it. We got boots off of it. We got everything you need off of it. And you could tell New Orleans wasn't quite ready for it. So I look at, again, I'm always kind of referencing Detroit, referencing Minnesota. Like that defense in Minnesota is insane. Like it's insane in terms of the type of pressure, in terms of the type of pressure patterns that they bring. And so they haven't shown any of that at OTAs, none of that. Right. So like, I'm assuming it's somewhere, but like, like just like these other teams, but like having not seen it, like I think about that defense, like getting ready for a defense that's that aggressive, that downhill brings that style of pressure. Like that's so hard from a protection standpoint to deal with. And you talk about like the shift in offensive perspective, like he's drawing from two places, right? He's drawing from Minnesota, he's drawing from Detroit. I look at that and I say to myself, like, man, like if I am a defense trying to get ready week 1, like what is he going to lean into? What style of runs are they going to be running? Like we assume it's going to be a mix of gap scheme, outside zone, but when you look at Detroit, they're really heavy, getting hats to the front side, kind of overloading that front side force defender and just wearing that guy out with the outside zone stuff. So is it going to be that? Is it going to look like more what they do in San Francisco or more what they do in Minnesota? So I think it's a huge advantage. And I think that's one of the reasons why, like they're being so deliberate about what they show at OTAs. And also they're being so deliberate about what we can talk about coming out of OTAs.
We're here with Logan Paulsen, Commanders Radio. You hear him and see him also on the YouTube Commanders channel all the time. Scott Jackson, Anthony Armstrong here with you. Believe in Commanders brought to you by FanDuel, part of the Believe Network. Well, it is tough this time of year, obviously, because you don't get to see, the contact and the physicality of camp, but you can see some things. Obviously, you're a trained eye. So your thoughts on the way this offensive line looks? It looks like a very deep line, probably the deepest line they've had in a few years. Even with, some people wondering if Allegretti can be the guy, full-time at center. What have you seen from that group, and how good do you feel about them and what they have set up themselves with?
Yeah, so for OTAs, I mean, it's always really tough for the offensive line. And like Anthony can remember this too, because like you're in those like soft shells, right? So like, me as part of the blocking surface, I remember kind of being really frustrated with this period because a defender could do things that they can't normally do, right? There's not that hard handle to hold on to. There's not that extra surface area to punch. So to me, I'm going to reserve judgment until like probably the mini camp to kind of really flesh it out. But in terms of like guys that like when you look at the room, like, man, you kind of say to yourself, like, Connerly looks good. He's such a lithe, good mover that shows up on the field. Cosme, I think people forget because he's coming off the ACL, just how athletic he is. Brandon Coleman's this big hulking man who's like a dancing bear. And obviously just having Laramie Tunsil in the building for OTAs, I think is a huge step in the right direction. So I think they've done a lot of good stuff. You can see how like the play action stuff is going to be a little bit of a new element for them, right? Because they didn't do a lot of it last year, just getting used to some of those techniques. But I think on the whole, like this David Blough system, especially looking at what they did in Detroit, is going to be a huge uptick in terms of just letting them throw some different punches as pass protectors and throw some different punches as run blockers, right? And like if you think about just unsettling defenses, like even if that group stays exactly the same from a talent standpoint, just the variety that they're going to be able to present to defenses, I think will help them. So I think they've gotten better. And I think the scheme will also continue to elevate them.
I love that. The change in punches and being able to show, counter punches and jabs, that's the play caller helping them out. And this is my daughter that wants to chime in with her input.
What's her
on
question?
The offensive line as well. She definitely understands that you got to change things up for a little bit. Sometimes the hairstyle's up, sometimes it's down. But I heard Nick Allegretti speaking, and I'm actually got more excited from hearing him after these OTAs and the way that he's approaching the position cerebrally. And he also said that he played center in the past. So how do you see his leadership standing out? He said that was one of his favorite parts about playing center was the leadership side of things. How's he stood out vocally, just taking the reins of that position?
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up the leadership element because, again, like I think back to the offenses I was a part of when I played, and the center is not like, it doesn't need to be like this crazy stud athlete, right? Or this crazy freak, right? It needs to be someone who's really smart, can target runs, can target protections, take some things off of Jayden Daniels' plate. And I think that's what Allegretti's good at. Like he's played for 10 years in the league. He's played on Super Bowl winning teams. He's played in a really good division, seen lots of stuff. And so I think that experience is something that it's hard to quantify for fans, but I think that shows up like every day at practice, right? His ability to be like, hey, hey, we got a motion on this run. Like they're going to bump the front. Let's make sure we get this targeted correctly because this overhang player is going to be blocked by the receiver or whatever it is. That's just an example. So to me, the leadership, the experience, like that's the thing that's really going to make that go for him, I think, and for this offense. And so I think that's why a lot, like the coaches, I feel, I haven't talked to anybody about this, but I feel that's why they're comfortable with him because of that experience and because of that leadership.
Logan Paulsen, Commanders Radio, with us, part of Commanders YouTube as well. Scott Jackson and Anthony Armstrong, Believe in Commanders. We are brought to you by FanDuel, part of the Believe Network. Give us a follow, like, and comment, please. We'd appreciate that. Before we move on to the defense, I do want to ask you about that running back room that has added Rachaad White, Kaytron Allen, the all-time leading rusher at Penn State, the guy they call Fat Man, and a veteran like Jerome Ford comes in, trying to make the team. Just kind of how do you see that group? I mean, there's obviously competition there, and of course, Bill, coming off a very strong rookie season, looks like they've got some serious options in the backfield this year.
Yeah, and I think that's been one of the more disappointing things about OTAs is that Bill's had that hamstring, so you haven't really seen him kind of on the grass. And, after such a, I'm going to say promising rookie year, I think there were some ups and downs for sure, but I think you see the explosive playability. Like you're hoping that he gets on the grass sooner rather than later. So, I don't know what his timetable is, but hopefully he's out there for minicamp. But I think you look at the rest of the room, and I think Rachaad White looks physically different when you see him in person. He's a little bit taller, a little bit leaner. Like I always thought of him as like a bigger, kind of more heavy set back, but you see, he almost looks like a wide receiver. And I think the way he catches the ball is very comfortable for him. And again, his footwork isn't that of a wide receiver, but his body control to the football, I think, is excellent. So that's someone I think that kind of, to me, has the inside track as like that third down back just because of what he did in Tampa Bay. I do think there's an opportunity for him to get some first and second down touches. I think, watching his film from last year in Tampa Bay, he's kind of a guy that's going to get what's blocked as opposed to Bill, who at times showed the ability to elevate runs. So I think like, he's a nice complementary piece to Bill's skill set when Bill's healthy, obviously. And then Kaytron Allen, you mentioned him. Like I like him as a runner. I think he's a guy that just has a very natural feel. Like he's not going to like wow you with a 40 or a vertical or great acceleration, great deceleration necessarily. But he's one of those guys that like when the block is kind of shifting this way, I know I can take one more step to kind of set that linebacker over here, cut back. Like watching his highlights from Penn State, man, like that's all over the tape. Like just a good feel for how to set up blocks, set up runs. I call it like running the cracks, finding those little gaps of air. And I think that shows up in practice. And so I've been really pleasantly surprised with him. You mentioned McNichols, you mentioned Ford. Like McNichols is, to me, just one of those unheralded guys who's going to make plays continuously. So he's had a couple days I've been out there. I thought he's looked great. And obviously Ford's kind of had a couple of splash plays here and there. So I think it's a room, like you said, that's competitive. I think there are some guys that are starting to maybe distance themselves, but obviously running back is really hard to evaluate because there's no pads. Yeah. So once that gets finalized, I think we'll have a better idea once we're through minicamp.
Man, you say Kaytron Allen, all I can think of is number 46, Alfred Morris, man.
I almost brought that up, but
it's a good call.
I know that's lofty praise. I mean, but he was unheralded. I mean, wearing 46, and he wasn't the fastest, but man, could he run that outside zone? He worked really well in this offense. So, but the folks are going to have to tackle him. The defensive side, the defensive line, let's start right there. One of the biggest things that I love hearing is that there's going to be a lot of one-on-ones that are created. Durante Jones is putting people in position to do what they do best. And piggybacking on back what you talked about with trading punches and jabs, just imagine, folks, if you were out there one-on-one with Steph Curry, isolation, no help, just by yourself, play after play after play. You're gonna get cooked. That's what they're trying to create on this side. What's your level of excitement for this defensive line?
I mean, it's tremendously high. As you guys know, it's like completely new look. Like it doesn't even really feel like the same group. Like last year, it kind of felt like, it's going to be pass rush by committee. It's going to be if this guy does this and this guy fits this role. But now you've got two guys who have been 10+ sack guys in the league with Kayvon Chason and Odafe Owe. And then you get, Dorrance Armstrong, who was coming off a very productive year before the injury, right? And then you get Joshua Josephs drafted, who has like one of the higher pressure rates in college football last year. And you're kind of like, all right, that's 4 guys that can really hunt and rush the passer, in addition to the guys that were here last year, like like Dietrich Wise, I think can play, right? Charles Omenihu, an addition that can play 4-eye, play on the perimeter. So that defensive line has become a different animal. It looks different. Like when you watch practice, it looks and feels more explosive, feels faster, feels bigger. And you mentioned the flexibility it gives Durante Jones. Like I look at what they did in Minnesota, and I kind of say to myself, man, they seem to have the right pieces to make that thing work here. And then the other element too, and I know this isn't the defensive line, but that defense in Minnesota, they did such a great job of blitzing the linebackers. You have a great blitz linebacker in Frankie Louvu. Sonny Styles is fantastic when it comes to rushing the passer as a blitzer based on his film at Ohio State. And then when you look at Leo Chenal, like he's a guy that lined up all over the place in the defense at Kansas City. But when you get him downhill on running backs, has some pass rush upside. So I know the defensive line will elevate the pass rush just from a personnel standpoint, but schematically, based on what they did in Minnesota, I'm kind of like, dude, look at all these guys that have this skill set to beat a back, to beat a center, to run pick games with each other. And it's very encouraging, I think.
Logan Paulsen's here with us, Commanders Radio, Commanders YouTube. You can check him out there as well. Believe in Commanders, Scott Jackson, Anthony Armstrong, part of the Believe Network, and we are brought to you by FanDuel. Please follow, like, and comment on the podcast. We'd appreciate that. All right, the back end, obviously the big addition, Nick Cross comes over from the Colts. You hear a lot about him in these early days of the OTAs. But I guess the big question is who's going to be playing with him at the safety position, Logan, because there's obviously some options there. But what have you seen from Cross, and how do you think they work the rest of that room in terms of safeties right now?
Yeah, I think it'll be really interesting because, again, when you look at Minnesota, and they haven't really shown a ton in OTAs, but when you look at Minnesota, and that's what I'm going to be referencing here mostly, is they get into kind of like these three safety looks quite a bit, and I do think the personnel here tends to reflect that. And when you look at Nick Cross specifically, like his ability to blitz, his ability to play kind of in that like pseudo linebacker role, kind of big nickel role, I think it's going to be really effective here. Because when you look at Harrison Smith from Minnesota, like he's always lined up kind of on the end of the line of scrimmage. He's the plus rusher, and the speed of Cross, who's a 4-3 guy to close to the quarterback, to arrive violently at the point of contact, that showed up with him in Indianapolis. And so I think like him at, near, and around the line of scrimmage is going to be awesome, but also the speed to, be at the line of scrimmage and then, kind of disguise a cover 2 look and get to that half field, I think is also something he can do. So I think he's going to be a movable chess piece in this defense, which is exciting. And then filling out the roster, like I think Harris probably has the inside track. That's just my opinion based on his communication style and how he played last year. And then I think you're really talented after that. Quan Martin, I think, is one of the more physically gifted football players on the roster, but has had ups and downs. So can we kind of maximize him in this defense? Hopefully, yes. Revo, I think, played really well at safety last year. Tyler Owens, another athletic freak. Like, they've got pieces. And I think it's interesting. One of the more interesting rooms, like once you get out of the top 2, in terms of who can fill that third safety spot for them, which they ran so much in Minnesota.
I've been on the Quan Martin bandwagon just ever since he came in the league, just thinking that there was always a little bit more to get out of it. I feel like last year with Harris going down, Quan was put in a position that he really wasn't comfortable with trying to play, high safety playing back. I feel like he's more of a guy that needs to be closer to the line of scrimmage, be more aggressive, just let him see ball, get ball in that regard. Now let's talk about the cornerbacks. 2 scrappy guys that got a lot of praise, Meek Robertson, Mikey Sanders still. They're basically feeding off of each other. How is that dynamic duo coming together? Little shorty 40s over there.
Yeah. So I think that group, I think, is probably the one that's going to maybe benefit the most from the additions to the front, and obviously Durante Jones' arrival. Because when you look at the Minnesota defense, which is the most recent point of comparison, I know Durante Jones has said, I've been, with Zimmer and some of these other guys, but the consistent thread with those defenses he's been a part of is the types of pressure they bring. And what pressure does is it allows, as you know, Anthony, like it allows the corner just to stand there and like they know the ball's got to come out. And so when I think about what Mikey does well, when I look at what Amik does well, it's like playing with vision through the receiver to the ball, and then knowing when they make that break, trusting the pressure, and the ball's going to be out, and then I can produce the football. So I think that's the thing. Like, and again, that hasn't shown up a ton in OTAs, but again, looking at the corners in Minnesota, looking what they were asked to do, I think their skill set, based on the stuff we've watched of obviously Meek Robertson in Las Vegas. Was that his last stop? Was that Las Vegas? He was drafted in Las Vegas.
Detroit.
Lions. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
right? Where he's like playing like in these kind of man coverage situations with like some match principles. And obviously, I think Mikey kind of same type of deal. Second half of the year, like those zone kind of match principles. I really think it's going to benefit both those guys tremendously, this defense.
Well, of course, you haven't seen Trey Amos yet because he's been out, obviously, with the injury coming back. But I got to imagine, too, another guy who came in the league, right? That was what they were excited about was the ability for him to go get the football, too.
Yep.
It seems like this would be another guy who will benefit from the scheme.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because, again, when you watched him at Ole Miss, like that was, again, his kind of superpower was his like both all the guys, their ability to like pattern match. So like recognizing stems of the 1 and 2 receiver to the same side, understanding the concepts that can come out of it, and then using their intuition to make plays on the football. And now I think they can execute that a little bit better because the offense isn't going to have time to kind of let things develop the same way they had last year.
Now, I'm glad you mentioned that offense. How much is it going to benefit the defense and those players to really trust what they see and make sure they're communicating properly because of how the offense is going to look multiple? It's going to look the same in a lot of instances, same route stems, but different route destinations. How do you see that playing out for both sides on offense and defensive?
Well, with regards to practice, I think it's going to be huge. I think one of the issues that the defense ran into last year is like, again, Cliff, I think does a lot of really smart stuff, but the simplicity of the offense is a double-edged sword. It's a positive, but it's also a negative. And so defensively, you're only seeing like 2x2, 3x1 kind of spread formations basically. And we don't have to worry about motions and shifts and checks and play action and responsibilities. And I think you saw some of that, especially early in the season last year, like in the Green Bay game. It's like, oh, we didn't see this motion in training camp. And now, like watching OTAs, like it's much more complicated. It's much more nuanced. It's forcing the defense. Like there was a clip I was just kind of watching Sonny Styles from afar where there was a motion. He checked to something different. Then they shifted back or they shifted the side of the back and he checked again. He kind of moved a guy out of the box. And it just forces those tools and those communication styles to come to the forefront when you're playing against like a more traditional NFL offense. And so I do think defensively, it's going to help you kind of find a lot of warts very early. And I think offensively, going against a defense that brings pressure, again, going from Minnesota, brings pressure the way that they do, you kind of say to yourself, like, I'm going to have great answers versus all these teams on third down, which are kind of exploiting these more aggressive pressure packages and pressure principles. So I think it's a great benefit for both sides here, but I would probably have to give the edge ever so slightly to the defense because again, they're seeing something that Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Ben Johnson, Detroit, Kevin O'Connell, like Mike McDaniel, they're going to run that. And so like to see that, I think is going to be very, very helpful.
He is Logan Paulsen, Commanders Radio, Commanders YouTube, here on Believe in Commanders. Scott Jackson, Anthony Armstrong. We are brought to you by FanDuel. You're part of the Believe Network. All right, before we let you go, just overall, I mean, look, when you have big change after a bad season like the Commanders had, you got 2 new coordinators, right? You've got, some other staff additions and subtractions as well. But you don't have any of the like contract stuff that we had a year ago with what was going on with the hold-in and Terry McLaurin and for a while hold out. How do you just kind of feel like this overall offseason has felt from this part of the season compared to where this group was a year ago?
I mean, it's like you said, I'm glad you brought up there's 2 new coordinators. There's a lot of unknown variables here, but in terms of the vibes, which I'm not a big vibes guy, but just when you're out of, when you're out of practice, you're like, this feels more energetic. It feels more cohesive. It feels more on message. And I think the thing, like having Terry out there, like I always sleep on kind of the soft science of football. I'm like, this is what the analytics say. This is what the formation says. Like but having his leadership out there has been awesome. Like watching him like talk a little bit of like, I don't know if he can cuss, but talk a little bit of mess to the opposing defense, right? Like the way his competitive energy and how it elevates the receiving room, the confidence Jayden Daniels has, like there's something to that. And I think having all that stuff kind of behind this group has shown up in practice for sure.
Yeah, and they got a Tunsil deal done quick, man. That's another one because that could have been one of those things that hung over you, right? I mean, because he's been in a few of those in his career, but they didn't waste any time, and they got that done. That was a quick and easy one this offseason too.
Yeah, and I think like when you trade what you traded for him and he played as well as he did last year, like that's an easy conversation to have, especially with how that position ages in terms of aging well. It ages like a fine wine. So that no brainer, get that thing done, get him in the building. And now you have a top 3 tackle in football. So that's an easy decision.
And a big time leader who's showing up in times where he's normally, down there handling his business in Alabama. But Logan Paulsen, man, appreciate you taking the time. Former teammate, UCLA. Used to come out there with that long hair. Dude was just old school as it
was. I forgot about the long hair, Logan.
Yeah. Logan, I was like, this dude, all he want to do is block, man.
That's it. That's all we wanted to do, man.
I was like, just give him the rock. I'm getting the hell out the way, man. Glad to have you, man. Thanks for joining us. This is Believe It Commanders, Anthony Armstrong, Scott Jackson. We're brought to you by FanDuel. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe. Hey, and share this with your mama so she can get all these Commanders news. We'll see you on the next episode. Peace out.